made it abundantly clear that a religious group should not be bullied for staying true to their faith. We're glad that New York finally agreed. Michael Harrington reporting.
The persecution of Christians in Mexico is said to be on the rise, and the nation's powerful drug cartels seem to be the problem. International Christian Concern has issued a report saying believers fear violence and intimidation from local cartels who extort churches and commit attacks of violence against Christ followers for speaking out against their drug activities. The Observatory for Religious Freedom in Latin America says churches are targeted by the cartels as a source of money. This is SRN News. UPS has decided to retire its fleet of MD-11 cargo planes.
The move comes just months after one crash during takeoff, causing 15 deaths in Louisville, Kentucky. The plane's left engine had fallen off the wing, and the plane was able to climb only 30 feet before crashing. The Federal Aviation Administration grounded all MD-11s after the crash. An agency statement this week said the FAA continues to review all the facts and circumstances in deciding whether MD-11s would be allowed to fly again.
That is Bill Alexander reporting. The average long-term U.S. mortgage rate edged up for the second week in a row, but does remain just above its lowest level in more than 3 years. Mortgage buyer Freddie Mac said today that the benchmark 30-year fixed-rate mortgage rate rose to 6.1%. It was at 6.09 last week. 1 year ago, the rate averaged 6.95%. More on these stories at srnnews.com.
In Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 29, God's Word, the Bible, has something to say about self-control. He that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty of spirit exalteth folly. God's Word, the Bible, in Proverbs 14:29.
The VCY bookstore serves listeners across the country with Bibles, reference books, commentaries, and quality Christian materials. Visit vcy.com or 1-888-722-4829.
You're listening to VCY America Worldwide, KBCX Gregory, and WVIW Bridgeport.
History was made on today's date. Stay tuned for an American Minute with Bill Federer.
He read a poem at President John F. Kennedy's inauguration. He won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry and received the Congressional Gold Medal. Beginning as a farmer in New Hampshire, he became a teacher at Amherst College, the University of Michigan, and a professor of poetry at Harvard. His name was Robert Frost, and he died this day, January 29, 1963. In an interview on radio station WQED Pittsburgh, Robert Frost stated, "Ultimately, this is what you go before God for. You've had bad luck and good luck, and all you really want in the end is mercy."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And friends, thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on VCY America. Samuel Adams was a statesman and one of the founding fathers, and he stated this: "Let each citizen remember at the moment that he is offering his vote that he is not making a present or a compliment to please an individual, or at least that he ought not so to do, but that he is executing one of the most solemn trusts in human society for which he is accountable to God and his country." I want to repeat those last words, that he is accountable to God and his country. Indeed, the matter of casting a vote is a critical matter, ladies and gentlemen, and it's my belief that one's vote is also a matter of stewardship. Yet there are those who elect not to vote and have the attitude of que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. In this critical election year of 2026, we want to remind you that elections have consequences, and so many lives are impacted as a result. The case in point is the recent election in the state of Virginia. It was January 17th that Abigail Spanberger was sworn in as Virginia's 75th governor. Not only did the voters who participated in the election elect a Democrat governor, but also lieutenant governor and attorney general. This was added to a Democrat-controlled General Assembly and a Democrat-controlled Senate, and this group combined have wasted no time in taking actions to try and gerrymander future elections, to just really bombard with new taxes, to attack life in the womb, to eliminate mandatory minimum sentences, to add the LGBTQ agenda into state statutes, and so much more. Our guest today has said that they are working to turn Virginia into Venezuela. Yes, indeed, elections have consequences. Joining us today, we welcome back Robert Knight. Bob is a former Los Angeles Times news editor and columnist for the Washington Times, as well as other publications. He has had senior positions in a number of pro-family organizations. Has written several books: The Coming Communist Wave, What Happens If the Left Captures All Three Branches of Government, Liberty on the Brink, Crooked, What Really Happened in the 2020 Election and How to Stop the Fraud, and The Battle for America's Soul, in which he provides 10 steps to restore freedom. Bob, thanks for joining us here today on Crosstalk.
Always good to be on with you, Jim.
So, Bob, I want our listeners today to understand what is happening in the state of Virginia right now, could happen in their own state and to our nation as a whole. Your state officers just took the oath of office less than 2 weeks ago, and we'll talk about the Unleashed agenda in just a moment. But if you would just comment on the election itself and what was leading up to the election. It was, the eyes of the nation were watching what was going on in Virginia.
Well, they should. Virginia is a key state, and it's one of the larger states, and it has a congressional delegation with 11 seats. But more important than that, it's right next to the national capital. Mm-hmm. So what happens in Richmond is watched in Washington, D.C. And everybody was surprised back in 2017. They were surprised in 2021 when Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, took the governor's office, mm-hmm. and the Republicans also won the Attorney General's office and the Lieutenant Governor's office, and they controlled one of the houses of the legislature. And Governor Youngkin, by all accounts, unless you're hard left, was a terrific governor. One of the first things he did was overturn the orders to allow boys on girls' sports teams and in girls' restrooms and so forth. The whole transgender insanity. He went right after it, and that was very popular. Mm-hmm. But his overturning that, he left the state with a huge budget surplus. They just had common sense policies, and crime fell. They did great governance. But let's ratchet forward to November 2025, and at that time, people were being whipped up against President Trump, mm-hmm. and of course, Trump makes his own waves with lots of things he says. Few people are indifferent about President Trump, and Virginia Democrats parlayed that into a total sweep of the election. And you mentioned my earlier book, Crooked, mm-hmm. And also the one that had the subtitle, "What Would Happen If." Yeah,
all three branches of government.
All three branches of government.
Yep.
Guess what? That's how it looks in Virginia now. So we're going to find out. They've unleashed a hard left agenda. They didn't even wait a day. Mm-hmm. I mean, they did it on the very first day in office. And we can get into some of that.
Yeah, and that's what's so amazing because I believe this rogue legislation was just waiting in the wings, and it didn't really take very long to go swiftly through the process. I guess there's one piece of good news we're going to start with is that there was an attempt within the first 10 days to really gerrymander elections, redraw the congressional lines and so forth, trying to do this prior to the 2026 election. But, Bob, that was just rebuffed by a state court earlier this week. But tell us, what were they trying to do?
Well, the voters of Virginia approved an independent commission to establish congressional districts. and the Democrats decided, no, we've got 6 seats, and the Republicans have 5. We want to redistrict so we can have all but 1 seat. And this is part of the wrestling going on all over the country about redistricting. It started in Texas and went to California. It's gone to other states. And basically, and in Maryland now, they're trying to get rid of the 1 Republican seat in Maryland out of 8. It's on the Eastern Shore, and it's held by Andy Harris, who is the chairman of the Freedom Caucus. So they'd like to get rid of him for a couple reasons. The R behind his name and the fact that he's a conservative leader. The way they can do that is bring more liberal neighborhoods into his district. That's what they did with Western Maryland, which is very conservative and now has no voice anymore because they did this little finger of a district down into Montgomery County, which is a far left county in the Washington area. I mean, they're very ruthless about how they gerrymander. But this judge said, hey, you've broken the rules you've set up with this independent commission. So right now, he struck it down, said you can't do this. And the Democrats, of course, are appealing it. We'll have to see where that goes.
But it appears, as far as November 26th, that map is going to stay the same?
I think so. I don't see how they could pull a rabbit out of a hat and get this all done so fast that it would affect this congressional election coming up.
But, Bob, when you look at a map and you ask, for the red-blue map coming up with the state of Virginia, the number of counties are overwhelmingly red. Yeah,
most of the state is very conservative. But you look at the urban areas, and especially the counties near Washington, D.C., Fairfax and Loudoun and Prince William, they are solidly blue, which means they're dominated by the Democrats, and that swings the whole state. You have to have a huge vote in all the other counties to offset what happens there. It's similar to New York State, where the city of New York is an outlier compared to the rest of the state. If you painted it in colors, most of it would be red, except for maybe urban areas like Buffalo. But even that area around Buffalo is Republican. It's conservative. But other states are like this, too.
Chicago and Illinois.
This is where the Democrats have one-party rule.
Yeah, Chicago and Illinois, Milwaukee, Madison here for the state of Wisconsin. Look at the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and on it goes. But so they've been turned back by the courts as of this point, and time will tell if they're going to gain traction on this for the future. But even with this aside, Bob, the agenda greatly impacts the matter of election integrity. For instance, I understand legislation was introduced that actually prohibits ballots from being counted by hand?
Yeah, any ballot that was originally counted by a machine in an election won't be counted by hand. In other words, you can't do a really accurate recount. They're already putting that off limits. They also have another bill that allows counting absentee ballots up to 3 days after an election.
My.
And then they have another that it gives local jurisdictions the right to run ranked choice voting, which is really a racket. It just really messes up the election. And Democrats somehow, in fact, left-wing Democrats benefit from it. And then they have a constitutional amendment in place, or not in place, in play, that would restore voting rights to felons. But there's a lot more to it. But I think the most shocking bill they've introduced, given the fraud going on in Minnesota, billions of dollars in welfare fraud from federal dollars being put into fake daycare centers and through nonprofit organizations. They have a bill that will prohibit state agencies in Virginia that hand out any federal funds from requiring nonprofits to, quote, determine, verify, or otherwise require proof of eligibility of any applicant for such benefits. Now, as I said in my column, this is fraud facilitation.
Right.
There's only one reason not to require proof of eligibility, and that's to make it easier to steal. It's just like denying voter ID. There's only one reason not to have voter ID, and that's to make it easier to commit vote fraud.
Yeah. I mean, this whole matter here, as you just talked about the nonprofits, that's a breeding ground for fraud to take place. And it's like putting your arms out. Come on, and we see so many of these straw nonprofits that have been set up, like in the Twin Cities and California and Ohio and other places as well.
The next state that's going to make news is the state of Maine.
Yes.
The Justice Department is sending investigators up to Maine because they found that the welfare recipients up there in certain programs went from a couple $1 million 2 years ago to now $102 million.
My.
And they've set up all these nonprofits that are handling Social Security claims, Medicaid claims, and who knows what else. And I have to say this, there's a large Somali community in Lewiston, Maine, that's grown bigger and bigger and is starting to throw its weight around the way it did in Minnesota, and the way they're doing in Dearborn, not so much Somalis as Arab Muslims. And I think we're going to see a big fraud network uncovered in Maine next.
Wow. Bob, I see another matter of dealing with the elections in Virginia, limiting the periods when officials can check voter registration lists for accuracy. I mean,
yeah.
Why have limits on that?
Yeah, I mean that's a key factor for vote fraud, keeping voter registration lists dirty. And I used to work for the American Civil Rights Union, which is now the American Constitutional Rights Union, and our group filed lawsuits in various states to ask them to clean up the voter rolls, or at least show us the voter rolls, and they all resisted. I remember Pennsylvania in particular. We asked for voter rolls in Pennsylvania in several counties, Philadelphia, in Allegheny County, which is the other end of the state, with Pittsburgh, and they all resisted. But when we finally got a hold of them, we looked at them, and there are hundreds of people who were at least 150 years old on these voter rolls.
My. Friends, you're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Robert Knight is our guest. The elections have consequences, focusing in on the state of Virginia, and we've got so much more to unfold in our next segment. Stay with us. We'll be back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, geologist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, if sedimentary rock is made up of sediments deposited by Noah's flood, where did the sediments come from?
Chris, it appears that before the flood, calcareous ooze made of tiny marine animals and secretions accumulated on the ocean bottom. Scooped up by the flood, they became today's limestone deposits. It also appears that the sandstone deposits came from created granitic rock, which eroded to yield the sand that are modern-day sandstones. Also, during the flood, intense volcanism occurred as the fountains of the Great Deep broke open, depositing huge quantities of volcanic ash. This became intermingled with other flood sediments to form a variety of rock types. Chris, I think the flood of Noah's day is a very important concept which we must understand if we ever hope to understand the world around us. Let's develop a Back to Genesis way of thinking.
Thanks for tuning in to Back to Genesis.
You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network. Robert Knight is our guest here today on the program. And friends, again, with the mantra, and I would hear Jelaine Appling from Wisconsin Family Council issue that over and over. Elections have consequences, and indeed they do. And we are talking about that aspect with the state of Virginia under the microscope right now. Robert Knight is there and talking about what's unfolding in their state as they have just now put in a trifecta of individuals from the same party and the litany of legislation that has been introduced, and certainly just the redistricting aspect has been rebuffed to this point. It doesn't mean it's dead for good, just for now, and many other things pertaining to voting. There's one other matter about voting I'm going to get in with you here, Bob, and then move on to some other issues as well. And I found it very interesting that there's been great insistence that illegal aliens, do not vote. No, they don't vote. They can't vote. They can't vote. And yet, Virginia's trying to ban ICE from polling places. It seems rather odd.
Yeah, it is very well. It isn't odd when you look at how they operate. They benefit greatly, even when illegal aliens don't vote. And they, although this is clearly designed to facilitate voting by illegal aliens, but just having illegal aliens in the country shifts the whole political calculus. And these blue states, so-called blue states, that are losing residents are going to lose congressional districts. But in the next census, under which congressional districts are allocated, we still count everybody, including illegal aliens who can't vote. And this dilutes the value of a citizen's vote.
Right.
If you have a district or a state that has lots of illegals, they're counted like voters, even though they're not. And there's been some very interesting statistics out there about how, if this is cleaned up, if we just count citizens instead of just bodies, then the Democrats will lose half a dozen congressional seats at least, maybe more, just because it'll allow only citizens to determine who is allowed to vote or not. So, I mean, that's a reform that should be done. And there's also the SAVE Act in Congress. That would be a national requirement to have voter ID in every state. And this would be entirely constitutional. The Constitution gives Congress the right to set voter requirements. It says that the states set them, but Congress can change them at any time. This means it shouldn't take more than a majority vote in both houses and a signature by the president. So I hope the Republicans figure out they need to move this while they control all three branches.
Elections have consequences, and looking at Virginia, Bob, there's another matter that's unfolded in Virginia, very tragic in my estimation. That's the war on the unborn. And, they acted so fast. There's actually going to be an amendment question on your November ballot to allow abortion up to the point of birth?
It doesn't have any limitations as far as I know. It just wants wide open abortion available. And, of course, once it's in the Constitution, you can't really challenge it under the Constitution. You could still challenge it under the federal Constitution, but that's what they're trying to do. They also have another constitutional amendment to enshrine same-sex marriage in the Constitution. And, it wasn't that many years ago that Virginia voters put into the Constitution a bill that restricted marriage to man-woman marriage. And, of course, the left calls it a gay marriage ban because they always cast it in the negative rather than the positive definition of what marriage actually is.
Right.
But, they have a very radical abortion agenda in Virginia, like anywhere Democrats get power.
Have there been other attacks against life in this new legislative session?
I didn't see other attacks. I think they're counting on this constitutional amendment, but surely there are more.
Yeah.
The list I had of the things they're trying to do in Virginia is not exhaustive.
Where do you see voters in Virginia coming down on that issue?
Well, they're like a lot of states. They, unfortunately, I think a majority of Virginians have been lulled into the idea that it's a woman's choice, and they've had the awful reality of abortion kept from them, so they don't see it as anything more than a medical procedure. So I think unfortunately, it's a high bar to try to get people to say, this ought to be illegal, killing babies in the womb.
My, where have we gone?
It really says a lot about where our culture's gone.
Right, indeed. And let's see, let's hit another area too. So the abortion things on the ballot and the LGBT agenda basically is there too, with bringing about a repudiation of the previous amendment and bring about so-called same-sex marriage. You indicate also that the Virginia governor is putting the state back into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. What's that all about?
Well, that's an extreme green initiative based in an organization in New York that takes money from states, and it requires the states to send taxpayer money to them, and then they buy emission credits to fund green projects. So this will mean that each household in Virginia will have to send more money to this group of activists in New York to do projects they may not agree with. But what's worse is this will raise Virginians' electric bills by an estimated $1,100 a year. Plus, it won't do a thing to lower the planet's temperature.
Right.
I mean, let's face it. With India and China spewing gases, anything the U.S. does is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's yet to be proven that man-made emissions are actually causing warming.
Right.
I mean, I don't buy that.
Right.
I really don't. I think it's a power play by the left to control everything we do.
I see also that despite the fact that the previous governor, Glenn Youngkin, brought about a budget surplus to the state, I see that there's this long list of tax increases and fees that are being pushed for the state.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. It's on virtually every transaction in the state, from vehicle repairs to dry cleaning, you name it. They also have a bill that adds 50 cents to everything that's delivered, whether it's by Amazon, FedEx, or even Uber Eats. They're really just grabbing for all the money they can. Oh, by the way, you mentioned we were talking about abortion, and there is one bill that establishes a 40-foot buffer zone around abortion clinics, which means if somebody approaches a woman on her way to the abortion clinic and talks to them, they can be charged with a criminal act under this.
Try that with protests in Minneapolis, huh? With ICE officers? 40-foot buffer
isn't that
run?
a different
Yeah.
story?
Yeah.
They can spit on them, do whatever they want to them, and we're supposed to say, well, it's just free speech.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's hit that tax issue then. Again, you said just everything, 50 cents just to everything that may be delivered to your home. And I saw, too, there's a long list of other taxes that will be increased in the state.
Yeah, there's an 11% tax on purchases of guns and ammunition. Got a new hotel tax, adding another 10% on, well, I'm not sure what the hotel tax adds, but there's a 10% tax on parking lots, most that are in certain local areas, including Northern Virginia. So, I mean, well, it kind of serves Northern Virginia right for voting in the Democrats. But I happen to live in Northern Virginia, so I'm not crazy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
they're also talking about an increased income tax as well. I mean, they're just tax crazy. And
there's been a surplus.
Yep, $2.7 billion surplus. Governor Youngkin left them, and $4.7 billion in the rainy day fund. That's for emergencies. But it doesn't seem to matter. They say, oh, we need higher taxes because we want to spend more for our Free Stuff Army.
You know, the Free Stuff Army, yeah, and I see also that there had been efforts to double the pay of legislators.
Yeah. Talk about a shot in the teeth. All these taxes are going to make life much harder for middle-class and working-class families because they hit them, you know, in all the things they have to buy. And meanwhile, they've got a 150% increase in their salaries in the works. So they're saying, look, we're going to feather our own nest while we grab more money from you. You know, elections have consequences.
Yeah. And friends, and that's what we want you to understand today is and Bob, again, it just blows my mind. We are less than 2 weeks into this new session with a new governor in the state of Virginia, and all of this unfolding within these 2 weeks. Yeah.
She came right out of the box. And she signed 10 executive orders, and you know they're all very liberal. They all push everything toward the left, and they're going to they're going to get rid of Columbus Day, of course, and replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day as an official state holiday. But here's the one that should really get more publicity. HB 863. It abolishes mandatory minimum sentences for manslaughter, rape, sexual assault, and distributing child pornography.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So they're going to reduce penalties for all these felons who are doing terrible crimes in the state of Virginia. Now, why would they do that? Why would they make it easier to commit crimes?
Read that list again, Bob, because some didn't have their ears perked up. What are they reducing minimum sentences on?
Okay, a minimum sentence for most of these felonies was 5 years. So they decided to get rid of it entirely for manslaughter, rape, sexual assault, and distributing child pornography.
Wow.
Now, who does that benefit?
Yeah.
You know, are they going to get a lot of votes from the child molester lobby? I mean, what are Democrats thinking? I don't know. I just know that
well, you know,
they seem intent on causing as much chaos as possible.
Now, I see that Virginia also elected the first Muslim woman in America elected to a statewide office. And, Bob, I see she took her oath of office on the Quran?
On the Quran, yep. And if you don't think that makes a difference, you haven't been paying attention. The Zohran Mamdani, the first Islamic/socialist mayor of New York City, put his hand on a Quran. In fact, he had two Qurans when he was sworn in earlier this month, and one of them came from a time when the Ottoman Empire was in place, and the Ottoman Empire was famous for being very oppressive against non-believers, all of them identified as infidels. So, I mean, Christians really have to understand we're under assault by kind of a green-red axis. And by that I mean an Islamic/communist effort to overthrow America and our basic institutions. And they're trying to do it through the election system.
Friends, we're up against a break. Would you have handy a sheet of paper, a pen or pencil? I'm going to be providing you an email address because Bob puts out weekly columns, and I'd encourage you to be on his list. He's got a stem winder of one coming up this next week. You can be a recipient of that and stay abreast of items Bob is working on. But we'll tell you more about that after the break. This is Crosstalk on VCY America.
The one book that's been credited as one of the major catalysts for the modern creationist movement is The Genesis Flood, authored by Dr. John Whitcomb and Dr. Henry Morris. More than 60 years ago, these two men joined together to write a controversial book that sparked dialogue and debate on Darwin, Jesus, science, the Bible, evolution, creation, and gave birth to the modern creation science movement. While skeptics cast doubt upon the authenticity of a universal flood, the Genesis Flood places before the reader the theological and scientific basis for a literal acceptance of the biblical account. This book provides illustrations, charts, diagrams, and sound documentation that harmonizes science with biblical truth. The Genesis Flood is available for a donation of $30 or more to VCY America. Call 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Robert Knight is our guest today here on the broadcast, and Bob, what alerted me to even interview you on this matter today is because of receiving your column, and you write a column every single week, and you're making this available to our Crosstalk listeners.
Yeah, I do. You just have to send me an email directly to robertknight4, that's the number 4, robertknight4@gmail.com. And after I do your program, every time, Jim, I get many people signing up for the free column. There's no charge. I just send one column a week. That's it.
No
and
spam.
You get it Monday morning.
Yeah, no spam or other things going on.
Yeah.
So, friends, again, all you write down this email address. It's Robert Knight, K, and it's with a K, K-N-I-G-H-T, Robert Knight, then the number 4, robertknight4@gmail.com. And in the subject line, just put "sign me up," and that's all you got to do. You don't have to put a name and address. You don't have to do all those things. Just robertknight4@gmail.com, and just put in the subject line "sign me up." And if you want to put a note, thanks for what you share on Crosstalk, or you have that opportunity to do that as well. But to receive that email weekly, and Bob, just give us a little bit of insight. What are you working on for this coming week?
Well, everything's blowing up in Minnesota right now, Jim, as you know, and it has national implications because I honestly believe if that ICE has probably done some things that they regret at this point. On the other hand, enforcing the law can't be abandoned. And if they stop doing that in Minnesota, which I don't think they will do, I think they'll do it on a less confrontational level.
Right.
That could lead to peace. But I see people out there, including Democratic leaders, pouring gas on the fire. People like Barack Obama, our former president, talking about the administration threatening the very freedoms we have and so forth. They're trying to stir the pot. They're trying to create more violence, I think.
Yeah, but he was doing the same thing. I mean, his Department of Homeland Security and apprehending those here illegally and sending them back as well.
Yeah, it was okay when he was doing it, but not when President Trump is doing it.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
I know. Well, Minnesota's a special case because they've uncovered billions of dollars in fraud.
Right.
Mostly in the Somali community, not exclusively, but mostly. And some of it is just so it's breathtaking, the amount of fraud.
Yeah.
All these fake daycare centers, Medicaid fraud, autistic care fraud. Just they're abusing all these programs. And they've gotten
fraud.
away with it because of Minnesota Nice, supposedly, which means you never question anything that's supposed to help people. But I think we ought to rename the mindset in Minnesota Vice.
Well, and Bob, you see, that's what they're trying to do to Virginia as well now. Nonprofits, no accountability, just go ahead and apply, but, for funds and resources, et cetera. And, again, friends, let me give you that email address again. It's Robert Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, Robert Knight, the number 4@gmail.com, and just put in the subject line, "Sign me up," and you can receive his upcoming column dealing with what's going on in Minnesota. But also, even if you go to a website now, you can see this week's column. His website is roberthknight.com, roberthknight.com. You'll find this week's article right there. If you click on store, friends, you'll find information about his book, The Battle for America's Soul. He was with us several months ago interviewing on that particular book. He's got that 15% off on his site. And I see even the book, The Coming Communist Wave, what happens, when all three branches of government, what happens if the left captures all three branches of government is the subtitle of that. And, Bob, you've got that 70% off on your site right now.
Yeah, because I hope people get it because it's still relevant today. And but I think the book that I hope people will order is Crooked, What Really Happened in 2020 and Why and How to Stop Vote Fraud, because it gathers all in one place, all the evidence, all documented, that if you read it and give it a fair assessment, you're going to know that the 2020 election was just not on the up and up.
Yeah.
There's no way it was a fair election. And it's interesting because the FBI is down in Fulton County, Georgia right now in Atlanta, and they're getting records regarding the 2020 election because they think there was widespread fraud there. And, the media are always saying, oh, yeah, they've adjudicated all this in courts all around the land, and they found no evidence. Well, no, they didn't adjudicate it. The courts threw out the cases before they even looked at the evidence.
Right.
In most cases, they just said, you don't have standing, so we're not even going to look at it. So this idea that it was disproven that there was significant vote fraud is nonsense.
And friends, Bob's got that at 50% off on his site right now, too, the book Crooked. So you just go to roberthknight.com, Robert H. Knight, and Knight is with a K, roberthknight.com. Click on store. You'll find those. Right on the home page, you'll find the aspect of this week's column here dealing with Virginia. Spanberger and Democrats work to turn Virginia into Venezuela. And again, to get his weekly newsletter, just send an email to Robert Knight, 4 at gmail.com. Bob, let's just also hit one other office there, and that is their newly elected Attorney General, Jay Jones. A very disturbing background, too. Tell us about him.
Well, he's a far leftist who a few years ago openly wished for the violent deaths of a Virginia Republican House Speaker. And it was in a social media post, and he talked about making the guy's wife watch as the children are killed. And I've never seen a guy elected who could be that crass and openly, wish for the deaths of people that disagreed with him. And yet he was elected Attorney General over Jason Miyares, who was a terrific incumbent Attorney General at the time. It's because of this Democratic sweep. People were voting really against President Trump, and they didn't turn out for the Republican ticket because Trump wasn't on the ballot, and people tend not to pay attention to these in-between elections. And now we're finding out how important these in-between elections really are.
Friends, let me give out our phone number to Crosstalk. If you have a question for Bob or a brief comment, our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. That's 1-800-733-9829. And Bob, that really brings us to the core of our discussion today. And as you have said those words too, elections have consequences. We are in midterm elections this year of 2026. How significant do you see these elections?
Oh, this is huge. If the Democrats regain the House, they'll immediately begin yet another impeachment proceeding against President Trump. And that they're doing it not because they think the Senate would vote to convict him, but just to throw a wrench into his administration and distract him from doing all the good things he's been doing, like securing the border, lowering inflation, doing a foreign policy that's actually having results, that kind of thing. They want to cripple him. And if Americans don't reelect a Republican Senate and House, then we're in for a world of hurt. And I don't usually, I don't like sounding partisan, but the Democrats have gone so far left that they're an unrecognizable party now. They're no longer liberal. They are hard left. The Progressive Caucus, which has nearly 100 members, and they're all Democrats in Congress, constitutes 45% of Democrats in Congress, and they are pretty much communists. The only senator in the Progressive Caucus is Bernie Sanders of Vermont, who has a long communist record. I mean, he got married in the Soviet Union. He was so enamored of it, and he's been openly pushing socialism all his career. So you see what the Democrats would bring if they manage to control Congress. Well, I hope Virginia will be a lesson for everybody in America. Don't sit this out next time around.
Bob Knight with us here today, and our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Drew is calling from New Mexico. Drew, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, you all. Anyway, I wanted to just comment that, we think that living in America, these things wouldn't happen, and then they say they had checked those Dominion machines, whatever, and then they had convicted one of those ladies that was involved there because they found out no fraud. So it's like we're on one side of the fence and on the other. Well, which is the truth? Was there or wasn't there? Or, the truth has to come out one way or another. Mm-hmm. If you can comment a little bit on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And, Bob, you said many of these cases never even reached the courts. They never got to examine the evidence, and yet there are those who are touting. See, he said Trump's DOJ is now targeting, trying to vindicate him from the last election. So how do you respond to that issue?
Well, some people say, oh, quit looking back. Let's just look forward. But unless we secure election integrity, we can't have fair elections anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very important they get to the bottom of these allegations that were never really examined fully. I don't think it's just looking back. It isn't just settling scores. It isn't just about the president going after his enemies. I think it's very important to reestablish laws that guarantee fair and honest elections. Everybody should have that in mind. But the Democrats, I got to say, are putting everything they can against that kind of thing. They have done away with voter ID laws. They used COVID to open up mail balloting, which is the easiest way to commit fraud. A presidential commission that was bipartisan and chaired by Jimmy Carter, and a Reagan or one of the Bush officials said that the best way to ensure election integrity is to make it in-person voting on election day.
Mm-hmm.
Not all these delays, not mail-in ballots.
Yep.
It's we're one of the few countries in the world that doesn't require voter ID in every election everywhere.
Let's get to James.
All other countries do it.
James in Tennessee, you're on the air.
Oh, thank you for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
All those bills that's being proposed in Virginia, you have to stop and ask yourself, why are they doing that? Why is the liberals and the Democrats doing that? If they get all that passed and it becomes law, then it would probably be a correct thing to think that land and property, businesses and property would be up for sale at a cheaper price compared to the regular market value. Then that's what would happen. And if that happens, who do you think would buy that land, that businesses and property, houses and stuff?
Yeah, people fleeing the state.
The answer to that question is it would be Muslims, which in turn is the whole point of them doing this to begin with, is to get the Muslims in, create cheaper housing for the Muslims and businesses for them to buy, and turn Virginia in the same as they did Michigan and Minnesota.
Thank you for the call. We're up against a break. I'll have Bob comment after the break. Friends, you're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Robert Knight with us today. And again, to get those emails, Robert Knight, the number 4, at gmail.com. You can do it during the break here. RobertKnight4 at gmail.com. Just write in those words, sign me up. Back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. The nation is reeling after an ICU nurse was shot on video combating with ICE. Now, this is an emotional issue, no doubt, and tragic. But here I am to tell you, my friends, let's pull back multiple feet, 30,000-foot view. We have many countries, Mexico, Iran, and China, working to increase the chaos in the streets. We apparently have people inside state governments feeding information about the whereabouts of federal ICE officers. So, my friends, understand this is more than just an emotional issue, as many are now looking at it as a tragic and emotional issue. This is a civil war. We are in a form of civil war, but we're also in a form of war nation state to nation state, as enemies foreign and domestic are trying to weaponize our immigration system, castigate any political opposition as dangerous terrorist Nazis to be dealt with. So, my friends, it's a spiritual battle. It's a worldview battle. Don't let emotion trip you up. I'm Brennan House.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Robert Knight is with us today, former Los Angeles Times news editor and writer for the Washington Times, writing columns for it and other publications, author of several books, and talking about the fact that elections have consequences, focusing in on the state of Virginia, and with being in a midterm election year as well. a very critical matter for every state across this nation. Bob, just before the break, the caller from Tennessee indicated, hey, this is going to, people, basically, they're going to flee the state. The land values are going to go down. Who's going to move in? He said is Muslims. That was his perspective on that. What do you have to say?
Well, I think it's about more than that. Certainly, Democrats want to retain power. I think that's more what it's about. One of their big constituencies is Muslims. There are some Republican Muslims, but they're, in terms of numbers, they are counting on Muslims to be a growing sector of the Democratic Party at the expense of Christians. Let's face it. They have different values. Sometimes Christians and Muslims work together. I remember in Montgomery County, Maryland, I was part of a group of pro-family activists trying to turn back a really weird sexual agenda in the schools, and there were Muslim imams that joined us and made their voices heard. So there are some points of agreement, but I think it's really about establishing total power of the state and trying to establish one-party politics somewhere. If you look at California, you see what happens with one-party politics. Gasoline is still over $4 a gallon in California. There are so many regulations, so many taxes. Minneapolis is just corrupt right to its ears, and it's a one-party system. Now we have New York City. It's a one-party city, and now we have a functional communist as mayor. And he's already talking about seizing wealth from rich people. It's part of that class warfare.
And that's proposed for Virginia as well. To tax those who have higher amounts of income at higher rates. Added tax to that as well. We just lost our next caller here. Our number 800-733-9829. So you're saying it's about that lust for what, ultimate control and authority?
Yeah, I think it is. I think Democrats are driven by a need to have control, and they honestly believe that the government should be the ultimate authority, not God, but the government. And they're at odds with Christianity, because Christianity is based on the Bible, and they hate the Bible. They hate the moral composition of the Bible. They hate the idea of man-woman marriage as the only valid form of marriage. They hate the idea that homosexuality is a sin in the Bible. And the Bible is also very pro-private property. Thou shalt not steal is one of the Ten Commandments. The Judeo-Christian value system is what's under attack in this country. It's about far more than Democrats and Republicans. And I'll just summarize. The Democratic Party has been commandeered by atheistic Marxists who hate God, hate Christians, and want to do away with our basic freedoms. And to do that, they have to keep empowering government. I mean, that might sound like hyperbole, but when you see it play out in places like New York City and Minnesota, look at the evidence.
Yeah, so what you're saying, it's not the same party as what it was just a couple decades ago?
Oh, goodness, even 10 years ago. But certainly a couple decades ago, I don't think John F. Kennedy would recognize the Democrats. These are not liberals anymore. They're hardcore leftists.
And, friends, again, the fact is that elections have consequences, and Bob is just laying out for us what is going on in the state of Virginia and what has happened just in less than 2 weeks. And that's the mind-boggling aspect of this, Bob, is that this is under 2 weeks, and already we've seen so much that has come to pass in this very short period of time. I believe we've got one last caller in here. John in Williamstown, New Jersey, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I was wondering if you had done any research. I've heard some things about this in the past, and I didn't know if maybe you had looked into it. The birth rate of Muslim families as opposed to American families. that are Christian and the long term, what that looks like. Because from what I understand in Europe, that's taken a pretty heavy effect over there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And yes, I mean, if you even go back to crosstalkamerica.com, you put in the name Usama Dakdak. We've covered that several times with him on the program. Just as he's coming from Egypt himself, understands this, was schooled in Sharia. But Bob, any comment you have?
Well, I think the most shocking book I've ever read, I think, is called America Alone by Mark Stein, who used to fill in for Rush Limbaugh, and he's a brilliant guy. Mm-hmm. And he was looking at Europe, and he said, just by demographics, Europe is doomed, mm-hmm. Because the Europeans, the Christians, are not having kids. Yeah. Or they're having one or two, where the Muslims are having 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. And plus they're importing them all. You know, Angela Merkel of Germany let in 1 million people, Muslims. Yeah. And they're having a huge impact on Germany. And I don't know if there's a great pushback at this point. The conservative parties are growing very fast, and they're trying to push it back and stop just the sheer amount of immigration from Muslim countries. But in the United States, you know, the Democrats are trying to import as many Muslims as they can. And not just Muslims, just people who have a whole different value system. A lot of them come from countries that don't share our constitutional love of freedom and understand limited government. They're used to having caudillos, you know, the dictator, right. And so they don't understand our system of shared power, constitutional limits on power, and that doesn't bode well.
And we're going to have to leave it there here today, Bob. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Yeah, Bob Knight with us here today. Friends, again, if you'd like to get his weekly emails, all you have to do is send an email to robertknight, 4, @gmail.com, robertknight4 @gmail.com. Just put sign me up in the subject box, and his website, roberthknight.com. Elections, indeed, do have consequences. Friends, thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.